Ready to ditch the old playbook. Today we're diving into a totally different approach to strategy, something called blue ocean strategy.
It's not about battling it out in a crowded market. It's about creating your own wide open space.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Our deep dive today is taking us into Blue Ocean Strategy, the book by W. Chan Kim and Renee Mauborgne. They want us to think less about fighting off the competition and more about, well, making that competition irrelevant.
Right. It's about finding your own blue ocean, a market space where, at least for a while, you're the only one swimming.
Love the analogy. But how do we actually find these blue oceans? The book uses some really interesting examples. One that jumped out at me was Cirque du Soleil. Talk about a reinvention.
Cirque du Soleil is a perfect example of what Kim and Malborn are talking about. I mean, they could have tried to compete with traditional circuses.
More elephants, cheaper tickets.
Exactly. But they realized there was a whole untapped market out there. People who found the traditional circus, well, kind of cheesy.
Yeah, I can see that.
So Cirque du Soleil offered something totally different. Artistry, incredible skill, even a touch of opera. Suddenly, going to the circus wasn't just for kids anymore.
They even got rid of the animal acts, which honestly felt like it was time.
Right, they were eliminating, reducing, to make room for something new and different. The book talks about this, the eliminate, reduce, raise, create grid.
So it's about making very deliberate choices about what stays and what goes, not just adding bells and whistles.
Exactly. Don't just repaint the old car, design a whole new vehicle. Another example, maybe a little unexpected, is Casella Wines. They completely changed the game with Yellowtail.
Yellowtail. Now that's a wine I remember. But wine is such a crowded market. How did they create a blue ocean there?
By understanding that sometimes you need to rewrite the rules of the game. The U.S. wine market back then was all about complexity, fancy terms, intimidating labels.
Yeah, it could be overwhelming if you weren't a connoisseur.
Exactly. So instead of battling for a spot on the shelf with the Merlots and Cabernet Sauvignon,
They went after a whole new audience.
exactly, they created a wine that was approachable, affordable, and most importantly, not intimidating.
They weren't trying to be the fanciest bottle on the shelf. They were redefining what wine could be. Tell me more about how they did that.
Well, they basically threw out the rule book. They ditched the jargon, the complex tasting notes, all that. Instead, they focused on simple, easy to understand language like easy drinking and fruity.
And who could forget that kangaroo on the label?
Right. They knew that standing out on the shelf was crucial. And they didn't try to be expensive. They wanted Yellowtail to be something anyone could afford. Wine for every day, not just special occasions.
Smart move. Speaking of unexpected blue oceans, the book also brought up the Model T. Now that was a game changer. But how does a car, especially one from way back then, fit into this whole blue ocean idea?
It's a great example, actually. Back then, cars were a luxury. Only the wealthy could afford them.
Okay, so I'm guessing Ford saw an opportunity there.
Exactly. They realized most people didn't care about status symbols. They wanted something reliable, something that could get them where they needed to go.
So Ford created a whole new market, the everyday driver.
And they didn't just slap together a cheap car. The Model T was designed to be durable, easy to repair. It had to be. Roads weren't exactly paved back then.
So Ford's Blue Ocean was about practicality, affordability, and opening up transportation to a whole new segment of the population. It's pretty incredible how relevant this concept still is today.
And it's not just cars and wine, right? The book also mentioned Nintendo and the Wii. That one threw me for a loop. I mean, weren't they going head-to-head with PlayStation and Xbox?
They were, but they found a way to change the rules of the game. Instead of trying to compete on raw power, graphics, all that, Nintendo focused on something completely different, making gaming fun for everyone.
Right. The Wii wasn't just for hardcore gamers anymore. Suddenly, families were playing together, people who'd never even held a controller before. They tapped into this desire for a more social, intuitive gaming experience. Remember those early days of Wii Sports, everyone swinging their arms around? Pure joy. That's the power of a blue ocean strategy.
And those motion controls were genius. Anyone could pick it up and play, no experience needed.
Exactly. Nintendo didn't just create a console, they created a phenomenon. They made gaming less intimidating, more inclusive, by challenging all those assumptions about what a gaming console should be.
So we've got circuses, wine, cars, video games. It's amazing how many different industries this applies to. But the common thread here is that it's not about outcompeting in a crowded market. It's about creating a new market where you don't have to compete at all. It's about questioning those assumptions, those rules that everyone else takes for granted. But how do we actually put this into practice? It can't all be about kangaroos and motion controls, can it?
You're right. It takes more than just a gimmick. This is where the practical tools from Blue Ocean Strategy come into play.
Like the strategy canvas, right? The book talks about that as a way to visually map out your value proposition compared to the competition.
Exactly. It's like taking an X-ray of your industry. You start to see where you're over-delivering, where you're falling short, where you're just blending in with everyone else. And that's where those aha moments happen, the ones that can lead you to your own blue ocean.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, have you ever used the strategy canvas yourself? I bet it can be a real eye-opener to see your industry laid out like that. It's like you're getting a whole new perspective on the playing field.
It's about realizing that the boundaries we see in our industries, they're often a lot more flexible than we think. And that's another important point from the book, the idea of looking beyond your existing customers and thinking about non-customers.
Non-customers. Okay, now that's interesting. Why would we focus on the people who aren't buying from us? Seems counterintuitive.
Because it can uncover some amazing opportunities. Think about it. When you understand why people are choosing something else, or maybe not even participating in your market at all.
You start to see those unmet needs, those gaps that nobody's filling.
Exactly. Like those aha moments we talked about earlier. But this time it's about looking beyond your competitors and saying, who are we not reaching? And why not?
So going back to Cirque du Soleil, they tapped into this whole audience that maybe found traditional circuses, I don't know, too childish, too expensive. They weren't competing, they were offering an alternative.
And Yellowtail, they realized there were all these people who felt intimidated by the wine world.
Oh.
They weren't going after the wine snobs. They were saying, hey, come on in, the water's fine.
And Ford, with the Model T, they brought car ownership to people who probably never thought they'd be able to afford one.
It's about recognizing those latent needs, those desires that people may not even be able to articulate yet. And then you find a way to meet those needs in a way that nobody else is.
This is really making me think differently about all those unwritten rules we follow in business, in life, everywhere. What if we broke those rules?
Yeah.
What could we create if we stopped assuming we know what people want and started really listening?
That's what Blue Ocean Strategy is all about. It's about challenging the status quo, finding those areas where you can offer real value in a way that nobody else is. Remember the eliminate, reduce, raise, create grid.
Right, where you decide what to get rid of, what to amplify, and what totally new things you can bring to the table.
It's a tool, a very practical one, for figuring out how to break away from the pack and find your own blue ocean. But even more than that, Blue Ocean Strategy is a mindset. It's about constantly looking for ways to innovate, to create value where there was none before.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm walking away with so many new ideas about strategy, about competition, about the possibilities that open up when we start questioning everything.
I'm so glad to hear that. This is a framework, a way of thinking that applies to so much more than just business. It's about approaching everything we do with a fresh perspective, a sense of curiosity, and a willingness to challenge the rules.
So, as we wrap things up here, I'm left with this question for everyone listening. What rules are you taking for granted? What would happen if you broke those rules? Just a little. What amazing things could you create?
What hidden needs are out there just waiting for someone to come along and say, I see you, and I have something that might just change everything?